All right, next question says, I want to follow up on last week's question and the coaching call where you answered my question on the single at 8 RPE progression. Unfortunately, the trend has continued this week. Deadlift was 222.5 at 8, essentially a 10 kilo slide this block. Squat is 170, so essentially treading water. A note, you said to stick it out sometime longer. I'm just becoming apprehensive for my competition on October 8th. I have a pivot block this week and 3 weeks before the competition. If you think I should ride it out until the comp and see if I can generate momentum, I'm happy to do that. I'm frustrated because traditionally I enjoy training at higher intensities, singles, doubles, triples. I was excited for this training group, and I'm trying to think of what the issue might be. My track is often higher than expected stress for the short term and or recovering poorly, but my long term has been just right. Subjectively, I think the volume after the singles may be carrying over. I'm usually pretty beat up in the lower body after my priority 1 and priority 2 and dragging a bit by the later sessions in the week. You mentioned warming up well enough. I believe I am. He goes on to go through some of his warm-ups and does sound like he's doing some substantial warm-ups. I've been sleeping 9 hours a night, diet's on point, use other recovery modalities throughout the week. I'm open to any suggestions you have at this point. I think I can realistically abandon the idea of setting PRs at the comp, but I'd like to compete anyway for the experience and just to see what's there on the day. Well, first off, I just want to commend you on your attitude. I think continuing on and doing the competition anyway is a good way to go and probably in your long-term best interest. I'm trying to get a better picture of what's going on here based on what you're telling me. And, I think we're running into some pretty significant roadblocks. Since we're getting so close to your comp, and since there's a limited amount of time and, just really constraints kind of all around, it's important that we get this right and get it sorted somewhat soon. I'm sure you would agree with that. It sounds like you're doing everything you can to recover properly. I'm not convinced that recovery is the problem, though. You said that your track long term is in the green, and that's usually what we look at to help us determine more than anything else how the athlete's recovering. More often than not. Short term and daily and stuff like that is useful in that it contributes to a more long-term picture. So especially given the question that we're trying to answer right at this moment, I think the long-term is the thing to look at, and that seems fine. So if it's not recovery, if you generally respond well to volumes like this and intensities like this, then, what else could it be? That's a hard question to answer, right? We've covered most of the obvious things. Now, at this point, I think that it's time to work in some other suggestions and work in some other recommendations. Let's look through your training log and find a period of time where you were getting good results from your training. And then my suggestion is that we duplicate that strategy. So maybe not the exact workouts, but the general strategy. Let's kind of copy that strategy in this last block leading into the meet, see if we can get some momentum going. And then finally, I think we're getting to the point where you're going to want to look into some more customized coaching, a training program that's going to adapt to your needs. So we're seeing some differing response rates across the different lifts, and we're seeing some of these harder problems that pop up. These problems aren't insurmountable. In fact, we have the tools to solve them. It's just that it's difficult, it's impossible to use those tools in a guided programming setting. So we're starting to run into that time frame where it's like, well, maybe we need to consider moving on to a more customized level of coaching. Let me know what you think about that. One way or another, I know that for some people that's a big ask. Other people it's a total no-brainer. They're on board with it. So definitely let me know what you think of it. I'd be happy to discuss it with you, and we'll see if we can figure something out in terms of some way to get your lifts moving again. And I think your training log is going to contain the answer for it, at least in the short term. And then in the long term, it's probably going to give us a nudge in the right direction.